everything about my money and finances from 2008 going forward. And here we are, we sit here in early 2026 talking about this.
Yeah, it is pretty wild that, I think a lot of times people, when they're looking at their situation and they're looking at other people and trying to reflect on how do I get where that person is, they think they got to go out and earn more. They got to go out and take more risk. They got to go out and do all the things they've been told. But that's not the problem. The problem is not what people don't know. It's what they think they know.
As far as in order for you to build, keep, and create wealth and create a financial masterpiece, a financial dynasty for you and your family is not short term. With the mindset, this is not a short term play. This is long term. This is about changing the way that you're thinking, changing your thinking.
People are always looking for the secret. They always want to know, what is the path to wealth? And Brent Kesler, I know you found this many, many years ago, but you also found a book. You found a book called Becoming Your Own Banker, and that book outlined the 5 rules to wealth and also some basic laws that have been around forever, but that apply directly to wealth. Now, can I just have you tell me a little bit about how these rules and these laws have applied in your life?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, again, as you know, my backstory, I first heard about this back in 2006. I was sitting in a chiropractic conference and I heard somebody talk about this thing, becoming your own banker, the infinite banking concept. And I thought, man, it sounds really, really good, but it just seems too good to be true, right? I didn't even believe it. And I had gone home away from that chiropractic conference and I did nothing with the information. So that book that you just referenced here, Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash, I actually bought that book, brought it home. I put it on my shelf. I forgot I had it. I went back to my chiropractic life. And then about 2 years later, I go back to another conference, and about 8 or 10 of my colleagues that were at the previous conference are now at this conference. They had assumed that I had started implementing these ideas that we were taught 2 years earlier. Just all right. So anyway, just like they had, but I had not. I had not implemented those topics. And so they were throwing up all over me basically about how this was working in their life and how they were paying off debt, recapturing money, as far as paying for all of their equipment in their chiropractic offices, all of their overhead. And they were just going on and on about how this was working, how they were building wealth, they were keeping wealth, they were keeping control of all of their money. And so I said, hey, man, there's got to be something to this, right? There's no way 8 or 10 of my colleagues are lying to me, possibly 1 or 2, but not 8 or 10. So I came home and told my wife, I said, honey, and again, this was back in 2008. It was actually, the month was February of 2008. I said, honey, we have to start implementing this concept in our own life and taking control of our own money. And then, my story kind of goes from there. I had almost $1 million of third party debt. To be specific, $984,711. And even today, when I tell that story, people say, how do you know exactly what the amount was? And I said, well, that was part of the exercise. You had to know exactly what you owe. Now, let me just tell you, Chris, that is a very, very painful thing to peel back the onion and look and see exactly how much you owe other people. That sucks. It makes your stomach turn and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it was that much. But when you make me, track it and write it down on paper and report it, it becomes real. So anyway, to fast forward, applying this concept in 3 years and 3 months, 39 months later, I was able to pay off all of that third party debt. And the amazing thing about it is I only added one step in my financial life. In other words, I never had to change my cash flow. I didn't have to work any harder. I never lost control of my money. I didn't take any additional risk. I simply added one simple step in my financial life, and it completely changed everything about my money and finances from 2008 going forward. And here we are, we sit here in early 2026 talking about this.
Yeah, it is pretty wild that, I think a lot of times people, when they're looking at their situation and they're looking at other people and trying to reflect on how do I get where that person is, they think they got to go out and earn more. They got to go out and take more risk. They got to go out and do all the things they've been told. But that's not the problem. The problem is not what people don't know. It's what they think they know that gets them into trouble. And you just kind of talk that whole thing through with that story. But there's also some basic rules that are talked about in that book. And R. Nelson Nash lived by these rules and taught others. Can we dive into the rules? Because people love to say, okay, what are the rules of the game, right? If you want to play any kind of a sports game or you want to play any game for that matter, there are always rules. And if you play by the rules, you get ahead further. So same thing with wealth. These are the rules. Do you want to walk us through those?
Yeah, well, let's go through Nelson's rules as I remember him always stating them. He has 5 rules. So, 5 rules. Number 1 is to think long range. Think long range. And people think, well, what does that mean? Think long range. Well, look, as far as in order for you to build, keep, and create wealth and create financial masterpiece, a financial dynasty for you and your family is not short term. It's a marathon. This is not a sprint. So, lots of people out there in the world of money and finances, they think that I'm going to try this for a little bit and see how it works. And if it's not working out, I'm going to get out of it and get something, and I'm going to go into something else. Well, you have to go into this with the mindset this is not a short-term play. This is long-term. This is about changing the way that you're thinking, changing your thinking. As far as when you think long range, in other words, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So a lot of people come to us and say, you know what? I'm too old to start this process or this concept in my life. Or I don't have any children. So what right. So why would I ever want to buy whole life insurance if I don't have children? I could take the money today that I'm putting in the policy and I can go put it into this other XYZ thing or widget and make more money immediately, right? Well, how about doing both, right? Because remember, this is not an either or. This is not like you're making a choice of do this or do that. This is an and. This is an addition to what you're already doing. So anything you're doing in your financial life right now that's working for you, continue to do that. But let's add this one step. And that step is what? The step is, where does the money go first? Where does your money go first? Instead of you just going out and you making that investment, or you making that loan, or you buying that piece of real estate, or even if you're going out there to pay off debt or pay off your car or pay cash for something, like pay cash to buy a car, pay cash to buy a house or a boat. What if we add one simple step and we just do that first? And then now we have the foundation that's going to help us to build the wealth. It's going to keep it all within the family, within a closed system. No leakage of money is now going out. There's no money being leaked out to other people. The money is staying within your family. So, is it going to be like profitable from day one, from month one, from year one? Not necessarily profitable, but here's what I can guarantee you. I can guarantee you're going to have guaranteed growth, and it's going to guarantee to get bigger as time goes by, right? It's kind of like a business, all right? So, all right, Chris, this is the example I like to use, all right? So I like to use the example of if you're going to go out and start a business from scratch, brand new, you're going to go open up a business. So in the first year of that business, is that business necessarily going to be profitable? No. Right? Most businesses are not profitable in the first year because you're doing all the research, all the due diligence. You have to go out, you buy the building, you hire the staff, you do all the documentation, all the legalities of stuff. You're buying the inventory. You have to acquire customers. There's a customer acquisition cost to all of that, right? So what you're doing is you're starting a business from scratch. When you go into business, you're not going into business business for a week, a month, a year. You're opening up and starting a business for the long term. You're thinking long range. So in your first year, you generally don't make any money in your business. All right. In your second year, now you're starting to just to have income that's coming in. Are you able to make all of the money? Okay, plus all the money you put into it? No, not necessarily. And again, Chris, I don't know about you, but I'm a big Shark Tank fan, and I watch Shark Tank quite a bit. And almost every entrepreneur that comes on Shark Tank, even though they've been in business for maybe a few years, and the sharks always say, "Well, tell us about your profitability." Even if you're making 100,000, a million, or 10 million, the profit is generally not in the positive. Most of the time, it's in the negative at that stage of the business. But the sharks still invest in those business because they see they created the foundation, right? It's kind of like getting an airplane off of the runway. They're burning up the fuel in the beginning to get the airplane up in the air. Well, that's what these guys have already done. They've burnt the fuel to get the business up and going, and now it's going to start being profitable. Well, in this banking concept, in this whole life policy, you actually have guarantees in the contract that is going to show you how it's going to build tax-free wealth year after year after year, and it gets better each and every year. So, Chris, if I came to you and I said, Chris, if I guaranteed you a growth in your business every year after year 4 and beyond, okay, after year 4 and beyond. So in the first 3 years of your business, you may not make a profit to cover everything you've already injected in the business. Okay. You may not make a profit, but from year 4 and every year beyond for the rest of your life, however long you're going to live, and in some cases, it's not just how long you live, it's how long your family lives, your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, and future generations, and that business can stay intact. And if I can guarantee you a profit in that business every single year from year 4 and beyond, and that profit goes up and up and up, it goes from 10% to 20% to 40% to 80% to 200% to 400%. A profit in that business, if I could guarantee that for you, Chris, how many of those businesses would you want to own?
A bunch of them.
As many as you possibly could own. Well, that's exactly what we're doing here is we're starting a business from scratch, which has guaranteed growth. And the cool thing about it is there's no like overhead as far as a brick and mortar building. There's no employees to bitch and complain and call in sick. And, I'm fighting with that employee. This employee's arguing with that one. There's like none of that. You don't have to worry about the grass getting cut. You don't have to worry about the maintenance on the building, right? It's a business that just continuously grows year after year, and you don't even have to go to work and be in the business. Chris, as long as you commit an hour a quarter, 4 hours a year, 1 hour per quarter on your business, that's going to be more than enough time for you to focus on this business. Why? Because this business is going to work whether you decide to wake up and go into it or not. It's going to work. Almost like when we talk about passive income and investment income, or like the thing I like to refer to as mailbox money. The money shows up no matter if you want it to or not because you've got your money at work and not man at work. But most people, for some reason, and again, it just kind of baffles me, most people, they are just caught up in this thing called instant gratification, where whenever you do something now, you have to see the results now, like in an hour or in a day or in a week. And that's just not the way it is with this business. So it does require you to have some patience, and you have to think long range. You have to be in there for the long haul. Now, the good news about this is there's absolutely no risk. There's no risk. If you can just get it through your thick head to think long range, you will never, ever, ever, ever lose. Because in the history of this business that we're in, a whole life policy in a mutual company that pays dividends, that's designed for high cash value, high immediate cash value, nobody has ever, ever lost if you just stick to the plan and stick to the process.
I agree with that. Yeah, so you got to have a long-term mindset around doing this. But I love your analogy on how you brought it back to businesses because I've opened many businesses and almost all of them, it's like it's a magic 5 year, sprint, I guess you would call it, where you're trying to get the first 5 years out of the way because your business isn't profitable until after that fifth year. Now with AI and technology, maybe it's a little bit shorter, but still, like you have no guarantees that your business is going to remain profitable into the future. We're here, this business, the business of being your own banker, you are guaranteed success. And that guarantee comes in the form of a contract from a giant mutually owned life insurance. I love that. I love that. Now, what is the second rule
Yeah,
behind
the
this?
second rule on this business that we're talking about is capitalize, capitalize, capitalize. Do not be afraid to capitalize and put money into your business. There are so many of us that want to put as little in as possible and want the highest return as possible. Well, don't ever be afraid to capitalize in this type of business because the more capital that you put in, the more growth, or I should say, the more capital that is going to grow. So, in other words, let's say you have three people. You have a person that wants to put in $100 into their business. You have another person that wants to put in $100,000 into their business. And you have another person that wants to put in $1 million into their business. Okay? All of those people, the growth factor is going to be the same for all of them. It's going to be the same for all of them. But if you know the end game and you know what the guaranteed growth rate is of this business, and it's guaranteed, and Chris, it's not me telling you it's guaranteed. It is in your policy contract. So it's not my flapping gums and moving lips telling you what it is. It is in your policy contract. It tells you what it is on a guaranteed level. Now, you do have the potential for upside as well on top of the guaranteed growth, and we call those dividends. We call those dividends. But dividends are not guaranteed. So let's not even talk about dividends right now. However, I do want to throw out there that every company we use has been paying dividends for over 128 consecutive years without fail. So, is there a pretty good chance that the companies will continue to pay dividends? Or do you think they're going to do something different than they've done in the last 128 years? Well, no, that's not likely. But since it's not guaranteed, let's not talk about it. Let's just talk about the guaranteed growth level of the business. So if you're the person that puts in 1,000, you get the growth on $1,000, which is good. That's great. If that's what you want, you get it on 1,000. But then if you're the person that puts in 100,000, you're like, oh, now I get that same growth, but it's on 100,000. Well, if you know the damn thing's going to grow anyway, why not put in as much as you can? And then what about the guy putting in $1 million? He gets the same treatment as the guy putting in $1,000. They all get the same treatment, but the thing is they all have a different mindset, or maybe in the beginning, just a different pocketbook size. And it's okay if your checkbook only allows you to put in the lower amount. But even if you start at the lowest amount possible, which, Chris, that's what we recommend to people,
Mm-hmm.
start at the lowest amount possible until you start to see and understand and have more trust in the concept, because we want you not to go to bed at night thinking, oh my gosh, did I make the right decision? Did I put in too much? But once you see that and you see how it's working, then you should continue to capitalize, capitalize, and capitalize. And in this book called Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash, on page 48, what does he say? He says your premium and income should eventually equal. So that means every dollar that runs through your hands, every single dollar that runs through your hands, you should attempt that. Okay, the thing is that you should attempt to get that into your banking system. Because if you're not controlling that money, if it's not in your banking system, it's going to be in somebody else's banking system and they're going to control it. So, why on earth would you ever be afraid to capitalize if you know for a fact, without a doubt, that it is guaranteed to grow? It's guaranteed to grow. Why
I
would you
love it.
not do it?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a business out there that didn't require capital. There's not a bank that's ever opened in history that did not first need to be capitalized. So that's a good rule. How about rule number 3? What is that?
Actually, before I get into rule number 3, I want to tell you something I just recently did. And I don't even think I've shared this story with you, and we talk quite frequently. I just invested $300,000 into a new community bank. It's called Portrait Bank. It's going to be in Winter Park, Florida. All of the stuff is ready to go, the charter, the licensing, and everything. Now, I'm a small, right? Again, right? So I'm a small fish. I'm $300,000 of over $30 million that are going into this bank. Okay. Now, and the reason I'm doing that is just like, not because I really want to do business with conventional banks or community banks, but I want to really get into the inside of this and see how these guys really, really play the game. Now, here's what's going to happen with that investment, or here's what I expect to happen with that investment. I am going to put in my $300,000. And in a period of 5 to 10 years, they're telling me about 7 years, we are now going to sell. We're going to sell the community bank to a larger bank. It's going to merge with a larger bank, and we're going to all get paid out. And the payout is going to be anywhere between 5 and 10 times what we put in. So that means the 300,000 essentially in 5 to 10 years would get me 1.5 million or $3 million. Now, I'm not going to get any money or dividends or any payouts or profit share in the time when all that is happening, right? But I am expecting the bank to merge, and I'm expecting to make some money, right? Or have my investment to make some money. If I didn't think it was going to make money, I wouldn't have done it. But here's the thing about that, Chris. It is not guaranteed to happen. I had to sign all these documents that say, hey, Brent, you might lose all the money you're putting into this bank because it may go under. It may go south. It may be another Silicon Valley type situation. Now, I hope it's not. I don't think it's going to be, but I'm going to be able to see and watch how this, just to see how, as far as how this works. So that is your conventional bank. People can lose money in conventional banks. I had to sign all this document saying I can lose money. Well, I never in my whole life policy, which is really essentially my own privatized banking system, all right? It's just instead of it being called a privatized banking system, it's called a high cash value life insurance policy, right? But but that has guaranteed growth. So I know if I would have put my $300,000 into that, what would happen in 5, 7, or 10 years? This is unknown. But that's what everybody knows about. That's what they all know about our conventional banks. So we have to start learning how to think outside the box. But anyway, stay tuned over the next 5 to 10 years. We'll be talking about that and see how that goes. But I'm doing it just kind of for shits and giggles to see, I mean, not just for shits and giggles because it's 300,000, but just to see how it all works and how this goes. And I'm going to go down there and I'm going to request a loan for my real estate investing from the community bank. I'm going to have a checking account there because we have to have a checking account somewhere, right? Why not have a checking account in a bank that I'm a part owner of?
I
So
agree.
sorry to get off topic there. You
That's
ready
all
for
right.
number 3?
Yeah, let's go into 3.
Rule number 3 is don't steal the peas. Don't steal the peas. Now, in this book, R. Nelson Nash, he writes something called Don't Steal the Peas. And what he uses is a grocery store analogy about a guy goes out and starts a grocery store. And he has, for example, he has cans of peas and they stock the peas and they stock them. And the thing I might get wrong is the exact cost. But so the peas cost the store 27 cents. Okay, and you're selling the peas for like 30 cents. Okay. But if you have your spouse go into the store and she says, well, my husband owns this store, or this family owns the store, so I'm not going to go through the front line of the cash register and pay 30 cents for the peas. I'm going to go to the back door of the store. I'm going to load my grocery cart and take the peas out the back door. Well, when you do that, you are diminishing your business. You're taking away the profitability of your business. The inventory is not going to be right. The business is not going to be as worth much now because you're basically stealing from yourself. You are taking your inventory and taking it out the back door instead of through the cash register at the front door. So, Nelson talks about your banking system. Don't steal the peas, meaning don't steal money out of your policy without having a plan to pay it back. Even though you can do it, just like you can steal peas out of the back door of your grocery store because it's your grocery store. No one's going to arrest you because you own the grocery store. But when you do that, you cause a lot of havoc in your financial life, right? So your money treat your money in your own banking system the way you would treat money in a conventional bank. So, for example, Chris, if you go borrow money from a conventional bank, you are expected to pay them back with interest, and you're expected to pay them back at a certain timeline, right? You're expected to do that, and we do that. All right, again, that's how we buy cars. We sign a note and say, okay, yep, we'll pay you back. We buy a house. Yep, I got the mortgage. I'll pay you a boat, whatever it is, credit cards. We are expected to pay back the money that we borrow. So treat your money the same exact way, because if you don't do that, the thing that you're doing, you are violating a principle in banking. You're violating EVA, economic value added. So treat your money the same way you would treat anybody else's money. And when you do that, your bank is just going to build more and more because you need to pay yourself back. Not only just pay yourself back what you took out, pay yourself back with interest. All right. And I do that with all my kids. I did that last week. All right. I'll give you another quick example. My daughter needed $200,000 in her bank account. She needed to show that she had $200,000 in her bank account for these condos that she's buying as investment properties in New Jersey. So the thing is that she needed it. And I said, okay, Hannah, I'll loan you the $200,000. I'm not going to give you the $200,000, even though she only needs it in there for a week. Here's what I did. I gave her the check for $200,000 and I made her write me a check back for $200,000 and some change for 10 days worth of interest at 10%. That's the check that I have in my drawer that 10 days later, I'll go back and put in my bank. And she's probably thinking, or actually my son would definitely think this. He's like, Dad, that's not very nice. Why would you charge me interest just to borrow money for 10 days? Well, why would I not? If you go borrow it from a bank, first of all, you got to go through the proctology exam to get it, which it would take you a long time to get it. So why would you treat my money any way that you would treat a bank's money? So I charge my kids interest for everything they borrow. I do not just give them money and let them not pay back with interest because a bank would not allow them to do it. So why should I do it? And on top of that, Chris, on top of that, who's going to get all the wealth eventually one day anyway?
They are.
So it's all staying in the family. So keep it in the family.
I got
So
a
don't steal
interesting
the peas.
thing on this one. When I owned my skateboard, snowboard shops, I bought stuff from my stores all the time. And I didn't read Nelson's book back then, but this just made sense to me. If I was buying a pair of sneakers, I would wait till one of my employees was working. I would go put the sneakers in I'd try them on, I'd buy them, but they'd give me a discount, but I'd always pay. And I did this over and over and over. Every time I wanted something, I would actually buy it with one of my employees because I wanted them to see that I'm the owner and I'm buying these goods at the same discount they were buying the goods at. So then when they wanted something, they did the same thing. They would go take it off the rack, or they bring it up, they'd put it there. I'd give them the same discount that I got, and they would do that. But it just felt like a good exchange. It felt like an honest
Yes.
transparent exchange because they were paying the same thing as the owner, so they felt good about it. But that's exactly back to stealing the peas. It's not just the wife taking the peas out the back door. It's then the employees see that and they're like, all right, well, if she can do it, then I guess we
Yes.
can. We work here, and they start walking the peas out. And that served me very well all those years I had those stores. All right, moving on. Let's get to rule number 4.
Yeah, let's get to rule number 4. And I'm glad you mentioned the discount because if you remember, I told you I loaned the money to her at
Mhm.
10%, which is a discounted rate because you know me, Chris, and I don't loan money to anybody at 10% interest.
No,
So that
no,
is
you
a
do not.
discounted rate for her. So she did get a discount. She's only paying 10% interest, where other people are paying 14 to 18. Rule number 4 is don't do business with banks. Because when you do business with banks, you're part of the problem, right? This is Nelson's rule. Now, I tend to kind of bend this rule a little bit because, you got to remember Nelson when he's talking about a lot of this, it was in a very high interest rate environment, a very high interest rate time where I believe the mortgage on one of his properties at $500,000 was like 18 to 21%. And that was for a prime borrower, right? Where it was even more than that back in the day. And I believe, I don't know, Chris, you know this better than I do, but back in the 80s,
Yeah,
weren't
that would have been in
interest
the early
rates,
80s. Yep.
yeah, early 80s, weren't interest rates 18% plus
They sure
on
were.
home mortgages? Right. So anyway, so Nelson says don't do business with banks, or if you do, you become part of the problem. You become part of the problem. You're just contributing to part of the problem. Because really, if you think about it, who makes conventional banks go? It's us. It's us, the borrower. We're making all the conventional banks go because as banks make 400 to 1300% annually on the money that you leave there each and every year. That's just what they make on your money, and they're paying you little bits of that to keep your money with them, right? So don't do business with banks. Now, I will say this, because I'm an investor, because I'm a lender and I lend money out, and so like I invest money, I do have some loans. I have loans with conventional banks, okay? I have a loan like I took out I don't know 5 or 6 years ago. I took out a mortgage on my home, my primary residence. I called my banker that I had used for years in the past before I ever even knew about the infinite banking concept. And I said, Charlie, I want to take out the max cash value on my primary residence that I can get. And at the time, my house appraised for like 2.2 million. And he said, I'll give you $1,560,000. That was the number, 1,560. And he says, I'll give that to you at a 2.2 and three quarters. I think a 2.8%, pretty close to two and three quarters. And I'll give it to you interest only for 10 years. And I'm like, how fast do I sign that paperwork before you change your mind? Right. So, because if you think about it, where else was I going to get $1.5 million at 2.8% interest only payments? Right. So I did it. And I still, to that day, I still have it 5, 6 years later. I think I did this around 2020, somewhere around that, maybe 2019. So I'm still paying every month. I pay, I think it's $3,700 a month, interest only. But what did I do with that 1.5 million? I took that 1.5 million. I tried to get as much of it as I can into my current banking system, which is my policy. And then from there, I took that money and I lent it out to somebody else that's paying me 10, 12, 14, 16% interest. Yes? So, okay, so for example, let's just say that I had that $1.5 million, and this is a real life thing, a real life scenario. I took that money and I'm going to put it into something that's going to get me 16% interest. So I lent it out. So if I'm getting 16% interest on 1.5 million, that equates to right at 20 grand a month in interest. 20 grand a month on 1.5 million, I'm getting about 20 grand a month. So do you really think I care about paying the banker $3,800 for the $1.5 million interest only loan when I'm getting 20 grand a month? Not at all. So all I'm doing is I'm using that money that was tied up in the property anyway. And I know you talk about this a lot to your viewers. You talk about HELOCs, which that's essentially what this is a home equity line of credit, right? It just happens to be this was a fixed rate for 10-year. It's a fixed rate 10-year. I guess you call it a mortgage on the house, right? So I'm paying about 3,800 a month, but I'm getting in 20 grand a month. So how long do I want to do that for? I want to do it forever. And then when it's time to come to pay off that note, here's what's going to happen. When those 10 years are up, I can choose to go in and pay that off. I can choose to pay off the 1.5 million and just take some of the resources that I have from other stuff and pay that off. Or I can say, you know what, Mr. Banker, I don't have that $1.5 million to pay you. Let's roll it over and do another note. Now, if it's today, it's not going to be at 2.8%,
Right.
obviously, but who knows? It still may be at a rate that makes sense. I just had another note that reset. I had a 5-year amortization note that just reset this last month. It went from 3.25% to 5.25%. That's a big jump. 3.25 to 5.25. But in today's environment, that we're talking right now in April of 2026, it's not a bad rate. Five and a quarter is not a bad rate, especially when you're using the money and you're able to get more money from and just make your money work harder. So, but to get back to Nelson's rule number 4, don't do business with banks because then you be part of the problem. I'm sad to say when I get to eternity, I'm going to have to tell Nelson that I broke his rule number 4, but I'm going to explain to him why I did it. And I don't know if he'll give me any grace or not, but we'll see.
Well,
I'll
that's
ask
good.
for forgiveness. I'll tell you that.
And I think that that rule is a tough one for a lot of people to 100% abide by, because it is a tough one to, in today's world, to eliminate the banks. Now, back when Nelson wrote the book, late 90s, early 2000s, I'm not going to say it was much easier, but it certainly was easier than it is today. So I like the fact that you're still abiding by the fact that you're making an arbitrage, a spread in the middle on the bank's money. So the bank isn't really winning. They're winning, but you're winning more than they are. So let's move on to the fifth rule, the fifth and final rule.
Yeah, the fifth and final rule, Nelson says, is rethink your thinking. Rethink your thinking is the fifth and final rule. And what does that mean? Rethink your thinking. Well, look, so here's what's happened to so many of us, Chris. The thing is that we've come in just to this life, and the thing we're taught is what? We're taught to go to school. Let's get a good job. Let's get our education. Let's get a good job. And now let's go to work for 30, 40, or even longer now, 50 years. And let's max out our 401ks, our IRAs, our qualified plans, our retirement accounts. Let's put all of our money there. Let's give up control of our money by putting it into a 401k, an IRA, or qualified plan. Let somebody else control the money. And whenever we get to that magic age, whatever that magic age is, which is retirement age, now we're going to be able to live off of the government. The government will take care of us. We'll have Medicare, Social Security. We'll have our IRA, our retirement plan. Well, here's the question I ask. Is there any guarantees at all that your 401k, IRA, qualified plan will be there when it's time for you to go access it? Is there any guarantees at all?
None.
Well, there is one guarantee, Chris. It's guaranteed not to go below zero. But how exciting would that be if that actually happened? Wouldn't that suck? And because we see people every day, we talk to people daily or weekly that are losing their butts in their retirement portfolio. They're losing their butts in their 401ks, their IRAs, or their qualified plans, right? So why even take on that risk? Why not you be in control? Look, guys, the only time you've ever lost money is when you've given up control of your money. I can do just as good a job as losing my money as the 401k administrator can, right? I can do just as good of job as the guy that when I walk in to Wells Fargo Bank and he's got a little corner office back there and says, "Come to see me for investment advice." I can do just as good of a job, or bad of a job as they can. So why do I want to give up control to someone else? And Chris, the book that you and I wrote, 6, 7 years ago, mapping out the Millionaire Mystery, I actually explained in that book about a guy named John that works at the FBO, just up in Camdenton, Missouri, of where when I fly into there, he works at the FBO. He retired, took all of his money back to one of those corner offices in his conventional bank. They called him up, I think it was 18 months later, and said, "Hey, John, sorry to tell you, but, about 89% of your portfolio is gone, you know. And that's why he was working at the FBO at age 70 years old, because he needed to make ends meet. So here's the thing. Be careful of who you're taking advice from. Just because they're the Edward Jones guy or the Charles Schwab guy or gal, it doesn't mean that they can't lose your money. It just doesn't mean that. So the thing that you need to do is rethink, reprogram the way that you've been taught about money. Now, I will tell you, I was pissed off when I first heard this information in this book, Becoming Your Own Banker. I was mad at my parents. I was mad at my grandparents because they never told me about this stuff. But guess what? The reason they didn't tell me is because they didn't know the information. Nobody ever taught it to them, right? So now that I know the truth, and now that I know what the wealthy, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Morgans, the Stanleys, the Barclays, now what I know, okay, so now that I know what they did to build, keep, and create wealth, I'm just going to use the tools that they're using. Most people do not use those tools. They don't use those tools because it's outside of the box thinking for them, and it's not the norm. So what do I always say? Never take financial advice from your broke-ass brother-in-law. They will give you financial advice all day long, and most of the time they're broker than you are. Use your own thinking. Do your own due diligence. Anytime somebody comes to us and is exploring this idea of the infinite banking concept, as you know, Chris, we send them to all kind of resources, all kind of videos. We have them talk to a money mentor about their specific financial situation. They go to all the Chris Naugle websites. They go to the Money Multiplier YouTube channel. There's tons of information and content, and we purposely, every single question that a client has, we turn that into a YouTube video. Every question, we turn it into a YouTube video. So if there's a question that you have about how do you build, keep, and create wealth this way, why are we doing it this way, and other people don't do it this way, or other people don't talk about it, every single obstacle, every single question, we have created a YouTube video. And if your question is brand new and we've never heard it before, tell us, and we'll create a YouTube video to answer that question. So the resources, as you know, and you do this so well, you give to your community. You constantly give them all the content. You give it all to them for free so they can do all their due diligence and their research. But rethink your thinking, because when you're talking about money, it's not what your parents and your grandparents taught you. It's a little bit different.
All right. And then the final thing in this book, he talks about several laws of wealth. And I want you to just pick one of the laws that you think is most applicable and that tails along with the rules that we just went over.
Oh my gosh, which one is the most? Well, let me start out by talking about the arrival syndrome, okay?
This is the one I was hoping you picked.
Nelson talks about the arrival syndrome, and so there's so many people that come to us and they get around our campfire and start sipping our Kool-Aid, and they're thinking, well, no, this can't be possible. You can't do that. Even you, Chris Naugle, years and years and years ago, when you and I were first introduced, you were a financial advisor for New York Life. You were working on Wall Street. You were the money guy. And when this concept was introduced to you by your friends Mike and Greg, you were like, there's no way. There's no way. You cannot possibly do this with this banking system, with this whole life policy. Mike and Greg, I'm going to protect you. That guy, Brent Kesler, he's a scam. He's a scam artist. And I'm going to protect you from that guy, Brent Kesler. And you were going to call me out on it. And you called me up and I said, Chris, before we talk, go watch my 90-minute presentation. And you were pissed off because I made you watch that 90-minute presentation. But then after you watched it, you're like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. I'm in this space, and I'm with one of the biggest companies in the world, New York Life, and they never shared it with me. They don't let us share it with the clients. They don't let us talk about it with the clients, right? So, all right. The thing is, there's so many people that they think they know everything about a certain subject. And you were like that at that time. At that space and that moment, you were like, there's no way, you can't do this. I know, Mike and Greg, everything there is to know about this. I'm a top producer with New York Life. And if that was the case, New York Life would have told me about it. And you learned later that you did not know everything about a whole life policy in a mutual company that pays dividends work. You didn't know it. And you, out of all the people, were probably the most receptive and the most willing to break down the barriers of the arrival syndrome. Because the arrival syndrome is when you think you know everything there is to know about a subject and nobody else can teach you anything new. They just, nope, I'm not listening to you. I'm not listening to you. You don't know any more than I know. So you have to be willing to be open and learn and just maybe there's something out there you don't know about money. God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for one reason. You should listen twice as much as you talk. Now, I'm still trying to learn that trait, but you should listen twice as much as you talk. So don't let the arrival syndrome get in your way. And because of the arrival syndrome, Chris, I purposely in my life for the last several years, so like every day I walk my dog 2 to 3 times a day, sometimes 3 times, sometimes 2 times. It depends if my wife walks the dog 1 time. And I'm walking along the path and I'm out there for 30 to 45 minutes walking my dog. And as I'm walking along the path, I occasionally run into people that I haven't met before. And the first thing I want to know is well, who are you? Where are you from? What kind of work are you in? What is your expertise? And when I learn what their expertise is, I want to learn about that subject. Even if I think I know about it, I want to know what they know because I know there's something that I don't know that they can teach me. So I believe I have totally conquered the arrival syndrome, even though sometimes my wife says I'm bullheaded and think one way. But I think that I'm very receptive to receiving new information that even though I think I know what it is, that I don't. And that is because of what this banking concept taught me in my financial life. Because if it wasn't for this book, if it wasn't for Nelson Nash's teaching me this and this book, Becoming Your Own Banker, who knows what I would be doing right now? Who knows where I would be? I know one thing, I probably wouldn't be in control of my money. And most of our listeners, Chris, are not in control of our own money. We are still relying on the Charles Schwab guy, the Edward Jones guy, the A.G. Edwards guy, the T. Rowe Price guy, all the commercials that you see on TV, about put your money with us and we'll let it build, but it's just not the truth.
No, I love this. Yep. The 5 rules to building wealth and keeping wealth. And then that last law. I love it. Well, Brent, thank you so very much for coming on and everything you do and everything you're doing, keep doing it. And, folks, if you got anything out of this video, put it down in the comments right now. Let us know your thoughts and let us know where you're at. Because you know what? Sometimes you just need to find yourself a Brent Kesler like I did who can show you the way. And that's a wrap, I guess.
Good deal. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for allowing me to share.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And folks, if you like what you've heard here, then the next step is to watch this video right here The Secrets of the Wealthy. That is the exact 90-minute video you heard Brent tell me to watch way back when. And now I'm telling you, go out there and watch that video. Thanks for joining. We'll see you on the next one.